It's my great pleasure to welcome everyone for this interesting session on application of artificial intelligence in ophthalmology, which is, the hot topic nowadays. Years time, it will become routine part of our clinical practice. So I'm sure the audience is very, very curious to know what are the latest developments. And as Dr. Mandar Paranspe has taken great efforts to put this session together, I would like to hand over the proceedings to him. But before that, let me introduce Dr. Mandar Paranspe. I think everyone in the every member of POS would know Dr. Mandar Paranspe and the member of MOS, of course. He is a comprehensive ophthalmologist practicing in Pune since last over 22 years, and he has a special interest in cataract and glaucoma. He has been a reviewer. He is a reviewer for Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. He is the editor of Blink, which is a newsletter of Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society, and he is the past editor of Poster, which is again a newsletter of Pune Ophthalmological Society. And he is one of those people, a great example of private practitioners who extremely academically enthusiastic. So hats off to you for that, sir. With this introduction, I would like to hand over the session, the proceedings to Dr. Paranspe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sucheta, for the kind words. I will share my screen. I will introduce the session and the faculty who are going to speak in this session. I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
So, artificial intelligence is fast emerging as a field of promise within healthcare to one of the real-world applications. Learning to use AI in clinical care will increasingly become widespread. Therefore, foundational knowledge of its use as well as analysis of peer-reviewed literature is important to understand this rapidly developing field. This instruction course will address some of the important issues of use of AI in healthcare. The first speaker is Dr. Preeti Kamdar, who is a glaucoma specialist at Kamdar Clinic and Jasema Institute since 1998. She has more than 50 presentations at various conferences and is the organizer of postgraduate teaching program and has been presented with the Women Achievement Award under the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao initiative of Government of India. The next speaker will be Dr. Sucheta Kulkarni, who is a Director of Clinical Services, Head of Retina and ROP Services at the prestigious H.V. Desai Eye Hospital, Pune. She has received public health training at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, is a trainer for cataract, medical retina, ROP at the H.V. Desai Hospital. She has more than publications in more than 25 peer-reviewed journals. She has numerous regional, national awards, including special felicitation by Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth at Buckingham Palace for her ROP work in October 2019. She is a reviewer of multiple journals in ophthalmology. Next will be Dr. Rajiv Raman. He is a senior consultant at Department of Vitreoretinal Services at Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai. He is a visiting professor at Vision and Eye Research Unit at Anglia Ruskin University, Cambridge, UK. He is a member of National Task Force on Diabetic Retinopathy, Government of India. He is a national expert on certificate course in evidence-based management of diabetic retinopathy by Public Health Foundation of India. He is a member of National Task Force on Diabetic Retinopathy for the AIOS. He is a member of the FDA's Network for Digital Health Expert. He has won the Asia Arvo Young Investigator Award, the C.N. Shroff Award from All India Ophthalmological Society, and the P. Sivareddy International Award, again from the AIOS. And he has extensively published nearly 332 peer-reviewed articles and 17 chapters. And he initiated one of the first comprehensive programs for screening for diabetic retinopathy in India and is a pioneer in teleophthalmology in India. Along with the team from Google, he developed and validated automated retinopathy detection algorithm, which was published in JAMA. Next will be Mrs. Ranjana Agarwal, who is an engineer by profession. She's an artificial intelligence and deep learning expert. She's assistant professor in School of CET at MIT Pune, and at present is pursuing her PhD in explainable deep learning framework for detecting retinopathy of prematurity at Symbiosis International University, Lavale, Pune. And she has multiple publications in peer-reviewed journal. So with this, I would like to stop my presentation and I would hand over the proceedings to Dr. Preeti Kamdar.
I'll start my.
I think so. You will have to stop
Stop
sharing.
your screen sharing, then I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, good evening, everyone, and I thank MOS and Dr. Mandar Deshpande for the opportunity. And I'll start my sharing my screen. All right. So the word AI is thrown at us now in every aspect of life, at every turn. Now, ever since AI has been used or FDA approved to diagnose diabetic retinopathy from fundus photographs, there is an excitement about using AI for the management of glaucoma also. And since I was the first speaker, I thought I will explain a little bit about what is AI and how it works. So, AI is a branch of computer science which tries to mimic a human intelligent behavior in computers. And though AI has many branches, the current excitement is because of the development of machine learning and more importantly deep learning. Now, there are two things which are necessary for this AI, and one is that it requires huge amount of data, particularly in the terms of photographs, and it requires computers which are better and faster. So, that is precisely what we are doing. We are generating large amount of data in the terms of photographs and fields and OCT pictures, and the computers are definitely becoming better and faster with greater computational skills. And deep learning helps us find patterns which we are not able to, with which data which we feel are not related, but it can find patterns in that data because of its faster computational skills, and that is how it helps us. So, now if you want to develop a model to which helps you identify say all vehicles, if you want to put it at a traffic signal and you want to identify how many cars went, how many two-wheelers went, so you will have to train the model. And for training this model, it will have to be exposed to large amount of pictures of say bicycle and jeep and so on and so forth. So, this large unlabeled data will be presented to the model, and then using deep learning, this is how it is going to work. Now, the deep learning is because of the use, of it uses deep neural networks like how we have in our brain. So, if for example, it is going to identify a bicycle, it is going to divide this bicycle, the photograph of a bicycle, into small little grids, and each grid will have a specific characteristic. So, using this deep neural network, it will try and reconstruct the image of the bicycle and use this knowledge to identify the bicycle correctly at every single turn. So, this is how it works, but mind you, you are not going to you are just going to say okay, this is a bicycle, and then whether it has correctly identified it or not. You do not know which features it uses, and this is what is the black box of AI. And that is one of the drawbacks of AI actually. Now, another words, if you were to self-learn cataract surgery without any training, only using 6/6 as the end point, so then imagine the number of cataract surgeries you will have to do to get it right, and plus there will be such a lot of trial and error. So, this is what is deep learning is all about and why it requires so much data. Now, what is AI and glaucoma? How will you use it? So, programs are being developed for using AI to read disc photographs and say whether they are glaucomators or non-glaucomators, fields, and decide whether it is glaucomators or non-glaucomators, OCT. So, programs for each of these parameters, then programs which can combine two or more of the above, like you can combine AI which reads disc photographs and fields and tell us if they are correlating or not, whether it is glaucoma or not, and give you a diagnosis. Then assessing progression is one area where AI and glaucoma can be used in glaucoma, predicting which patients are at risk of progressing, and the list is endless, but this is what generally it can be used for. So, now coming to the studies. So, Lee and colleagues, they evaluated a deep learning program for detecting glaucomatous optic neuropathy based on fundus photography, and they demonstrated that deep learning can detect optic neuropathy with a very high sensitivity of 95.6% and a specificity of 92%. Another study which says that by using, again similar thing, using fundus photographs, you could develop it, you could diagnose or identify glaucomatous disc damage with a very high sensitivity and very high specificity. Now, fundus photographs you can also use, photographs you can also use to discriminate between eyes with normal and abnormal visual fields, whether it is a glaucomatous field defect or whether it is a not glaucomatous field defect. Now, this particular study, what they found, they used different kind of machine learning methods, and the newer machine learning methods are able to diagnose pre-perimetric glaucoma using this deep learning classifying a type of AI with a higher sensitivity and specificity and differentiate healthy perimetries from pre-perimetric glaucoma. So, even in all apparently normal fields, that is the diagnosis of, the definition of pre-perimetric glaucoma, where the fields are going to be normal, even in those fields it could diagnose which have early glaucomatous changes and those which did not have glaucomatous damage. Now, even forecasting that if I have a particular field, how is the field going to be after say 5 years. So, AI could be used to predict future visual fields and how they are, and it was used in glaucomatous eyes. So, you could have that kind of prediction also. Now, Kim and colleagues, now this was using individual OCTs or perimetries or disc photographs. Now, combining visual field, OCT data and using intraocular pressure and corneal thickness. So, trying to use all the data together, you could, 4 different machine learning algorithms were developed, and they showed a high accuracy, sensitivity and specificity to differentiate eyes between glaucoma, between glaucomatous eyes and healthy eyes. These are the number of studies which have been done, and they are just getting more by the month. Now, however, what is the problem with glaucoma? There is something called as a ground truth. That is, when you are training a model, you have to very clearly tell the model, is this glaucoma or is this not glaucoma. But however, in glaucoma what happens is, if a person is shown a disc photograph, I have 2 minutes.
Yes, you do.
Yes,
Okay.
okay.
So, if a person, if 10 glaucoma people are shown a disc photograph, sometimes all of them will agree, but most of the times there is no agreement. And also the fact remains that there is no single test for diagnosing glaucoma. It is everything together, IOP, disc, fields, OCT and a good follow-up gonioscopy, and that is the real challenge. Now, this is the challenge in challenges for using AI in the development of a good model for glaucoma. But I am not going to go into the details of this, because the subsequent speakers are going to do. How should it not be used is one thing, that it is not a substitute for clinical skills. That is one thing which you have to make very clear. You still should learn how to identify a glaucomatous damage. You should still learn how to identify glaucomatous damage in a perimetry printout that you are given. But how is it going to help our patients and us? That one is that we can reach out to people with limited access to healthcare. If you have just a photography machine where you take a good disc photograph and you could send it, and we could identify a glaucomatous disc with greater sensitivity, it would help a person who is even in a remote village. So, individualizing glaucoma management by identifying which patients are likely to respond to treatment. A glaucoma specialist and a comprehensive ophthalmologist both would be helped. Training ourselves to become better clinicians. Will it replace the clinician? Definitely not, but we have to guard against hyposcelia. We should learn another set of skills, and thank you for a very patient listening. So, as of now, where we stand is everybody has developed their own AI, everybody is in the process of using it and finding out how it is doing in the real world, and once we get these into the market, we will know that how good they are. But eventually we will rely a lot on AI to diagnose and manage glaucoma. Thank you very much for a very patient listening. I will stop my screen sharing now.
Thank you, Dr. Preeti. That was an excellent talk. We move on to the next talk. We'll try and take questions if time permitting at the end of the session. Next is Dr. Sucheta Kulkarni, who's going to talk about the application of AI in ROP.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Paranspe. So ROP basically fits exactly the Wilson and Jungner's criteria for screening. So the disease is an important health problem. The concerns in ROP is there is this skewed demand and supply ratio. The need for screening is so huge and the availability of the expert is so low that some out of the box solutions need to be found out. And cost of ophthalmologist led screening is of course going to be very, very high, especially when the people who can screen and treat are very low in number. So Dr. Preeti Kamdar has beautifully explained what exactly is artificial intelligence. So the algorithm basically learns about pattern of an abnormality through exposure to multiple similar lesions in various fundus images. I think Dr. Kamdar has already explained about how AI works and how it is similar to biological neural networks. So I'm not going to talk on this. So speaking about few common terminologies used in artificial intelligence related research, ground truth. Basically, ground truth is nothing but annotated or labeled images by human experts. And one must never forget that AI is only as good or as bad as the ground truth, which means if the images are labeled in a wrong manner, then the AI is also going to learn the wrong way. So it is very, very crucial for the human experts to invest enough time in properly labeling the images, which is one of the biggest challenges for busy clinicians. Segmentation is basically a process of extracting a particular part or a lesion from an image to identify it properly. So let me explain it using this image, and Mrs. Ranjana Agrawal can correct me if I'm wrong, because she is the expert in the field. So this particular image of ROP shows optic disc, then tortuous blood vessels, the neovascular network here, and a ridge here. So segmentation is a process where each lesion is identified separately, and the algorithm would learn to put these lesions together to formulate a diagnosis. So what are the challenges in using AI for ROP? Again, diagnosis for ROP is extremely complicated as it is in glaucoma. So one needs information on zone of the retina. The retina is divided into 3 zones, 1, 2, 3. The stage of the disease, which is again 1 to 5 stages, and the extent of the new vessels, which is as per the clock hours involved, and presence of plus disease, which is tortuosity and a dilatation of the posterior pole vessels. So, and there are theoretically possible 18 to 20 permutations and combinations of all these findings. And based on the combination which is present in a particular case, there are 3 types of management decisions: either review the case after a few weeks, or treat the case, or discharge the baby from screening. So the algorithm needs to learn about the management decisions as well if you are to use it on a large scale basis for community. And again, the next challenge is plus disease or pre-plus disease, which is basically a range. It's not, you can't pinpoint the level of tortuosity and dilatation to call it as plus or pre-plus. So it's basically a wide range, starting with mild changes to very severe changes. And the variations for the diagnosis of plus disease could be so large even among the experts that this subjectivity is the biggest challenge. And secondly, in extremely preterm babies, the macula is almost often undeveloped. So if the macula is not developed, it is very difficult for the AI algorithm to learn about the zone of the disease, because you use the optic disc and macula as a landmark to measure the zones of the retina. And there is no available data sets on ROP in public domain, which again makes developing new systems difficult. So very briefly, I will speak about this particular AI research that we did on ROP along with Ranjana Agarwal from Symbiosis Institute, where we developed a framework for automatic detection of all zones of the retina for ROP screening, which is the first and the basic step in the diagnosis. So using optic disc as a landmark, we developed systems which could identify zone 1, 2, and 3. We also developed an algorithm which could identify fovea in the images where macula was not developed at all, which is a very common problem in extremely preterm babies. And segmentation framework was developed to identify optic disc and blood vessels, which would again be able to identify whether retina is completely vascularized or incompletely vascularized. Because if there is no ROP, then still the AI needs to give us a diagnosis whether retina is mature or not. Because if it is an immature retina, even if there is no ROP, baby is going to need review screening. And we also developed ROP data set from different imaging systems. We do have different types of cameras that we use for ROP. One is RedCam, which is a US based model, and Neo is India developed model from Forest Company. So we use data sets from both the systems so that the AI algorithm that we developed could become more robust. And of course, for all of this, the experts needed to invest their time in preparation of the ground truths. So I'm going to skip this diagram. This is very complicated. Basically, this shows the process flow that we used in our research. This is an example where the AI algorithm actually measured the distance between disc, center of the disc, and macula, which we defined as R1. And of course, the definition of zone 1 is double the distance 1. And we also could measure the distance between margin of zone 1 and margin of zone 2. The accurate distance between these two has never been described in the literature. So I think with the help of our AI research, we could actually identify the distance between these two margins of zone 1 and 2. And the time needed for training of this algorithm was just 14 minutes, and single image testing could take only 30 seconds. And the accuracy was 98%, even in the poor quality images. So here on the right side of the screen, you can see 3 images from the fundus, where the topmost image is very hazy because the baby is extremely premature. There is this vitreous haze of prematurity present in the baby. So it's very difficult to trace the vascularization of the retina, where the AI could actually learn, give us a diagnosis that retina was immature, still in zone 1. The vessels were still in zone 1. So poor quality of the images was not a barrier for developing this AI algorithm, which is a very, very good point, because in clinical scenario, we would see almost 15 to 20% of the images would be of very poor quality. So to conclude, AI, acts as an assistant to medical experts. It does remove the subjective variation, which is a very, very strong strength of the AI systems. And it can be trained easily to give management decisions, which is very important, because presence or absence of plus disease doesn't give you a management decision, especially in rural setup. Babies who are admitted in rural NICU cannot travel to a city to get a second opinion with an expert. So the main challenge in ROP is if the image quality is poor, or if there is some query about the diagnosis, even with AI system. As in other diseases, babies cannot travel because they're often sick, critical, and admitted in the NICU. So unlike adult patients, they cannot travel to experts. So it's very important for the systems to also give management decisions. And using all these things, AI can identify high risk infants who need actual examination by an expert. So this is one of the biggest advantages of using AI for ROP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sucheta, for a wonderful talk. Actually, it was this paper which triggered my interest, or rather stimulated me to go ahead and plan this instruction course. So we move on to the next talk by Mrs. Ranjana Agarwal, who is an engineer, who is an AI expert, and we need this kind of synergy to understand what exactly happens while developing AI software. Over to you, ma'am.
Ranjana, madam.
Can you start your talk?
Yes. Am I audible? And
Yes.
my
Yes,
screen
yes.
is visible?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Good evening, all. So I will skip these slides. Need of AI in healthcare and all. Dr. Preeti and Dr. Sucheta has covered all these things.
Ma'am, can
Only
you go
one-
to the presentation mode, please?
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I will skip these slides because it has been already covered by Dr. Preeti and Dr. Sucheta. Only thing I want to mention here is AI will never replace by doctors will be never replaced by AI. Only it will assist doctors so that they will get time to treat the patients, critical patients, and they will save time in screening. That is the biggest advantage of AI. Because what we observed in our study means I with my other colleagues, I have interacted with my other colleagues who are working in this domain, AI in healthcare. All of us had the same experience that initially the doctors were reluctant that will AI really help in their subject and how it will help. So that was the problem we faced, and then we started our path. So these are few examples where where AI is used in all medical domains. AI in ophthalmology has again Dr. Preeti has mentioned different opportunities where AI can be used, but I would like to mention that now though many researchers have been done in medical domain, AI in healthcare, this they are not yet deployed. But this system recently, this is from 2021, NTU hospital with TTS hospital in Singapore, they have deployed this system for screening glaucoma. This is the latest figure I have taken. So these are the various fields where AI can be used in ophthalmology. Now I will directly go to the point, challenges in health IT. So major challenge, basic thing required for developing AI software is the data set. Because if we give wrong training, it is going to give us false output. So basic challenge is lack of annotated data set. There are no data sets available. Why it is not available? Because data is not standardized. There is redundant data because health information is not exchanged. For example, there are many doctors working in ROP. I will talk about my case study now. There are many doctors working in ROP field, but only I am getting data from HVD hospital. So if I take data from another doctor, there may be data redundancy. And because of this, because there is no health information exchange, I don't get more data. Lack of common data analytics platform is again major challenge. And because there is different information we can get from different doctors, it is fragmented information because there is no common data platform. So this is the major challenge in health IT. Another challenge is patient's acceptability. Patient will believe that their medical needs are unique, and so they are reluctant to use AI. Even doctors are reluctant to use AI software. So there is a great need to educate medical students, residents, and fellows in the art and science of compassionate patient care. Because while collecting the data set, what we have observed, see, it is not possible for the senior doctors to spend all the time with us to annotate data. So they ask fellow doctors to do that job. And what we have observed that they are not that much interested in research part of it. They are interested in their practical implementation. So there should be some kind of training for or AI awareness between them also. And this black box nature, Dr. Preeti has mentioned that AI is a black box. The way doctor diagnoses the disease, looking at some features. For example, ROP is diagnosis by looking at optic disc, reach, and blood vessels. So that is, those are called the features of the image, which can be explained by AI. Then only doctors and patients can trust the diagnosis. So that is also need. And last point is medico legal challenges. So from all these, it is difficult. That is why the AI systems are not yet deployed, though there is lot of research being done. So so I have few suggestions for this. Major problem is identifying a clinical unmet need and design of data sets. These are the major challenges in developing AI software for health IT. So what we can do is there can be forum interactions between the medical experts and the researchers to discuss the issues which can be solved by AI, and proper documentation or case studies can be maintained of that. So doctors should be able to define the problem clearly. They should trust what AI can or how AI can help them in their software, in their treatment, and then the problem can be defined, and it should be clearly defined. They should be convinced about the advantages of the AI system. Then from the side of researcher, he should understand characteristics of the disease, diagnostic performance, and explanation of disease. This is possible only when he sits with the doctor for annotation of the images. So even if the data set is large, as Preeti ma'am mentioned, that large data set is generated, but that is of no use till it is labeled. And labeling is the most time consuming and costly task. Because I will give my example. Initially, when I told Sucheta ma'am that I want 10,000 of images, she said, yes, we have more than that available. And she gave me those 10,000 images. But while labeling, we hardly got 3,000 useful images for our software from that. And this work means we are collecting, they are labeling the data set from 3 years. 2018, I'm doing this work. Until now, we have got just 3,000 images. And if we see the research work in US or in China, they claim that they have images more than 30,000 or more than 10,000. So it makes a difference in the performance of the software. So after studying all these things, or after understanding the requirements of each other by the doctors and by the researcher, then the standard format of data set can be designed. And so for that, he has to consider the feature characteristics of patients, like in this my case, there are premature babies, from which area they are coming, and all other things. Madam has shown me how they do the procedure, ROP procedure. Then machine used for screening, as she mentioned, RedCam and Neo cameras are there. What is their resolution? What is the quality of the images? So in general, Neo gives less accuracy than RedCam. It depends. I mean, so I will just explain all these points with my case study. Madam has explained this, that this is explanation. We want to explain the disease, so we are doing it with the image processing. So if I see what the software now, there is ROP tool which is giving the ROP severity 1 to 9 stage it is giving. That means they are just predicting that it is zone 1 stage 2, zone 3 stage 1, and so on. But how the doctors will trust whether really it is zone 1 or not? So we have given this explanation. We have actually marked the zone on images, and we have shown the blood vessels reaching to the zones. By that they can, so if I label this image as mature retina, they can believe, yes, it is mature retina because the zones vessels are reaching to zone 3. So that way we have segmented this optic disc, vessels, and reach, which is, so this is our basic system. This is what is our aim. This is the ROP diagnosis tool which we are aiming to develop. So earlier, when it was not clear how it is to be, Madam was new to AI and I was new to ROP. So that time we had just trial and errors for at least 6 months or more than that. So we first prepared Excel data sheet. She dictated all the cases possible, like just now she mentioned 18 to 20 combinations possible. So with all those things, her fellow doctors prepared this Excel sheet. They started preparing, but then it was very time consuming. And again, in second review, we thought that some columns we can eliminate. Again, in third view, what we did to make the work faster, because we were getting the data very slowly, as we all know that ROP doctors are very, very less compared to the patients. So they were finding less time. So, sorry, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So then we prepared these folders of zone 1, stage 1, zone 2, zone 1, stage 2, and so on, whatever are the combinations possible of zone and stages. And then we started putting the images into that into those folders. This way, yes, I will wind up now. This diagram madam had shown how we prepared the data set. This is actual work done. And I will just talk about ground truth preparation. It takes long time to do that. See here, these three ground truths we prepared separately. So optic disc was prepared, vessels were prepared, and this ridge was prepared. So I was not able to identify ridge in each and every image. So what the fellow doctors did, they just put the marking here in this image, where is the ridge, and then I did this ground truth. So it took long time to prepare all these ground truth images for at least 500 images. And now with this ground truths and this is segmentation. So with this ground truth and segmentation, our software is detecting the stage. You can see this image, there is stage 3 and these blood vessels are reaching to this. And we can see variety of ROP images. Those are not clear, but still our software is detecting or segmenting the retinal structure with more than 95 accuracy. One more thing I want to add, as madam mentioned, Preeti ma'am mentioned that there is sensitivity of 90% above is achieved in glaucoma detection. But that is because public data sets are available in diabetic retinopathy, and those public data sets, if you see the images, they are only of good quality and selected images. So if you run that software on real life data, it may not give you the same results. So that is one limitation of all those researches. Now we have, because ROP data set is not available publicly, we have started preparing our own data set, but that is taking a long time. So it really requires patience, and it is very time consuming to do research in healthcare if the data sets are not available. That is why that common platform or collaboration is required to prepare the data sets and make it available for research. This paper madam has mentioned. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ranjana Agarwal, for a wonderful talk. I'm sure many of us would understand that we need this synergy between the medical experts and the AI experts to develop AI platform. I will now share a talk by Dr. Rajiv Raman, who had sent it to me today. Just give me a minute.
Doctor, you want us to share? He's already sent it to us.
No, I can do that. Is this visible?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mandar, for sharing this.
Yeah, just screen sharing. We are not able to see the presentation.
It's not visible.
1 second. I'll just stop and reshare.
Okay.
Mr. Sai, can you do it from your end?
Doing it now.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, it is visible now.
First of all,
Thank you,
I'd
sir.
like to thank
Thank you.
Dr. Mandar for giving me this opportunity to be part of this instruction course. Next 10 minutes, I'll be sharing with you how AI will help manage diabetic retinopathy better and how we can implement AI in real time. So what AI can actually do, it can automate a repetitive task, the things which we can do, but we know that we are less, the number of ophthalmologists are less, and we can make effective use of our time in some other way. Or AI can find new signals, things which we cannot do, predict something which is a cornerstone for prevention. As far as diabetic retinopathy is concerned, if you look at automating a repetitive task, it is screening for retinopathy, diagnosing stages of diabetic retinopathy, or classifying OCT abnormalities. Regarding finding new signals, AI has been used to predict OCT thickness from retinal images, predicting progression of diabetic retinopathy, predicting other microangiopathies, predicting response to therapy, and predicting systemic abnormalities. I'll briefly cover each one of them. So it has been used for screening and diagnosing diabetic retinopathy. And let's see what DR screening guidelines say about AI. In 2020, the American Diabetic Association included AI as a part of screening diabetic retinopathy, and they said that any of the AI system which can detect more than mild NPDR and DME can be used as an alternative to a traditional screening approach. However, they went ahead saying that the results should be documented and transmitted to a healthcare professional, an eye care professional. More importantly, they also said that when AI should not be used for screening, people who already know that they have diabetic retinopathy, those who had prior treatment for diabetic retinopathy, and if they have symptoms of visual impairment, of in-person screening by an ophthalmologist is required. AIOS also recently came out with these guidelines, and they did say that it's empirical to the ophthalmologist to grade images and identify those who are referable by AI should be graded by ophthalmologists, and even 10% of normal should be what has been identified normal by AI should be again checked by an ophthalmologist. Are these AI algorithms accurate for diabetic retinopathy? This was our first paper in November 2016 with Google, where we showed that AI or deep learning system can be used for screening diabetic retinopathy. Thereafter, there have been multiple publications by multiple groups globally, and accuracies of most of them seems to be reasonably good. So what to look for when you're selecting an algorithm? You should look for number of images they have used in their training set. It's important because we had shown that after 60,000 images, the performance doesn't change. That means if the AI algorithm has been trained on a set of images very less, you need to really look with a lens how good these AI algorithms are. It's actually in a computer jargon, it is told that garbage in and garbage out. So it all depends on what was the ground truth, how the ground truth was ascertained. There can be multiple ways by ophthalmologists, by educated truth, by multiple graders. So that's again gives you some idea how good the algorithm would be. Whether the algorithm was trained on mydriatic or a non-mydriatic image, majority of the commercially available AI algorithms are today, which are available, have actually been trained on mydriatic images. One of the one like the Remedio has been trained on non-mydriatic image. So you must know how you intend to use the algorithm in your clinical practice, and whether the algorithm were trained on a single field or a multiple fields. Like Google AI algorithm has been trained on single field. If you look at Selena, which is from Singapore, Seri, it's been trained on multiple fields. So it actually, the selection of algorithm depends on the circumstances of an intended screening. You want to use mydriatic, non-mydriatic, single field, multiple fields. Based on that, you select your algorithm. Is the performance dependent on camera? This was actually the work which we did with Google in Thailand, where we had used multiple cameras, and we did find that if image is gradable, the performance of AI algorithm seems to be similar across the cameras. how we can improve the efficiency of AI algorithm for DR screening. This is one of the work which we did with in a study called a Smart India. Some of you are part of it, where we tried developing an algorithm which can predict the gradability of the image with a very good accuracy, so that if an image is non-gradable, it can alert the photographer to retake the images. Another work which we did with a group in Hong Kong, where we tried developing an algorithm for diabetic retinopathy screening with ultra-wide field optos images with that also showed a pretty good accuracy. How we can implement AI in DR screening? So there are two ways. It can be used as a fully automatic mode, like what Arvind is using at physician clinic or their vision centers with people who have no knowledge or a poor knowledge of grading. The model, the images are uploaded and AI gives the diagnosis, and based on that, the referral is done. How we use it at Shankar Nethralaya is more like assistive mode for anterior segment specialists who have knowledge, but they're not much involved in DR screening. And the images are uploaded, the ophthalmologist grades the image, and then he checks AI, and he has a chance to augment his grading based on the AI result. So this is a short video which shows that. So the workup is done by the optometrist. He takes the image, consent is taken, and once consent is done, the images are uploaded. He also writes whether it was dilated or non-dilated, whether the cataract was present or not. Now the patient comes to the ophthalmologist, and he has a chance to grade diabetic severity of retinopathy and DME, and then he checks the automated result. If there is difference, he can again relook at the image and give the final grade. So this is what we call as an assistive DR screening. This is our initial 350 patients. The accuracy of this system work is pretty good, as comparable to what we had published in the clinical study. Again, if you look at referable diabetic retinopathy, it's not only presence absence, even for referable retinopathy, the performance of the algorithm seems to be pretty good. We also tried using another AI system which is developed from South Korea, which can detect presence of diabetic retinopathy, presence of, I would not say diabetic retinopathy, any retinal lesion, presence of glaucoma, disc suspect, and ungradable images. And we used it in various specialties to see, can we reduce the referrals? So we're used in glaucoma, and actually the true referrals were picked up pretty good as compared to the ophthalmologist. We have also used across the whole country screening in Thailand, and we did show that it is comparable to the human graders in screening diabetic retinopathy in a nationwide screening program. It can also be used to classify OCT abnormalities. This is one of the very good paper which describes any OCT taken on various machines. It can classify whether it is a center involving DME or a non-center involving DME. Regarding predictions, there are a couple of ways it can be used. So this is our recent work, which you will soon see in ophthalmology retina. If we can label the fundus photos from the OCT, like if you look at this photo, it has got on a fundus photo, it is a center involving diabetic macular edema. But if you see OCT, the center involvement is not there. It's not a center involving DME. Another patient who has clinically doesn't look like a center involving DME, but OCT, you can see there is center involving DME. So we labeled the fundus photos from the OCT ground truth and got pretty good accuracy in detecting DME from the fundus photos alone. We can also use it to predict progression of Just DR. 2 minutes, This sir. is one of the beautiful work which shows that we can use deep learning to predict directly the chances of progression of diabetic retinopathy with the accuracy of 0.8. We also worked with Cambridge consultants to look at, can we detect other microangiopathies? And we did, this is a recent publication where we could detect diabetic neuropathy with a fairly good accuracy from the retinal images. It can also, people are working on trying to see if we can predict the treatment response. This is ongoing work with Zeiss, which we have been working for predicting the response after anti-VEGF, and some encouraging results. One injection, how much reduction can occur in the central subfield thickness and volume when we inject anti-VEGF in diabetic macular edema. This is one of the work which we have been doing with BITS Pilani. Can we identify the inflammatory components of diabetic macular edema? And we did use trained the model using uveitic macular edema. And it seems that it can very nicely detect the inflammatory markers, again, indirectly giving us whether we can identify responder versus non-responder on the OCT. It can be used to predict systemic abnormalities. AI can be used using retinal images, again, a work by Google Health, where it could predict the cardiovascular risk factors from the retinal image. So if you look at it, not only it could predict whether a person is smoker, non-smoker, age, gender. No, it can also give a risk. How much is the risk for a coronary event in next 5 years? This is a more recent work, some hidden signs to detect diabetes from external eye photograph. You can see the AUC is pretty good. It looks at the paralimbal vessels to identify whether a person is diabetic or pre-diabetic. So the future seems to be very exciting, and how AI will help us manage diabetic retinopathy better. It has already paved way in screening, diagnosis. We are gradually seeing it is entering, and soon our decision of treatment, whether which treatment would be better for diabetic macular edema, would be governed by AI using the predictive power of deep learning. When it will come to clinical care, it's like money. We have seen last couple of years how we have transformed from a physical form to now everything paying from a mobile phone. It's not far, it's already in our clinics, and next couple of years we'll be using AI more in our clinical practice. I'd like to thank my diabetic retinopathy team and my Department of Vitreoretinal Services at Shankar Nethralaya for giving me this opportunity to work on this important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for an excellent talk. It was a privilege to listen to one of the pioneers of AI and ophthalmology in the country. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
You'll have to stop sharing the screen, Mr. Sai.
What a wonderful and inspiring work, Dr. Rajiv Raman. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So with this, we proceed to the last talk of the session, which is going to be delivered by Dr. Paranthe, Challenges and Barriers in Using AI in the Real World.
I first of all like to thank the scientific committee of Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society, its chairman, Dr. Ragini Parekh, and her team for giving the opportunity to present this instruction course. As we've seen in the previous presentations, AI is a big promise to all of us, but obviously any new technology has its own share of problems. So it has been increasingly used as a tool in medicine and ophthalmology in particular. Adopting AI in healthcare have its own sets of challenges and barriers. And this presentation is aimed at understanding some of these issues in using AI in healthcare. Clinicians need to be aware of these issues while adopting AI now or in the future, and government and regulatory bodies also need to address these concerns to make adoption of AI safe and secure for the society. We'll directly go to some of the key challenges in AI implementation. The first is data sharing. Now, data sharing means that the data is shared between various agencies like the medical community, the pharma, insurance, government, and research institutes, and it could also be an open access on an open access platform.
Doctor, excuse me, the PPT is not seen.
Now is it visible?
No.
You again unshare and start screening,
Yeah.
sir, sharing it.
Now is it visible?
No, no.
But I can see that my presentation has been shared. I don't know.
It says you have started screen sharing, but we are not able to see the presentation.
Now?
No, no, not as yet.
I don't know. Can I just continue with my presentation so that, I mean, is that okay in the interest of time?
Yes, yes, I
Yeah,
think so.
sure.
I don't know what the problem is, but anyway. So the data sources could be from various sources like the personal health data, like demographics, or the healthcare provider notes, or images, or laboratory results, or genetic testing data, or recording of medical devices and wearables. Technology platform used to generate data could be the network servers, the electronic health records, the genomics data, personal computers, smartphones, mobile apps, and wearable devices. It is basically about productizing the AI. So you have to understand that availability of massive amounts of data also involves data management, which has been alluded to previously. Integration of this into complex existing clinical workflow is extremely important, and compliance with regulatory frameworks is also an important issue. So the data sharing would involve initial training. It has to also involve ongoing training. It has to involve validation of the AI algorithm, and also the AI algorithm improvement. Data needs to be shared across institutions and also nations. It needs to be anonymized and de-identified so that the privacy is protected. You have to take an informed consent for possibility of wide distribution. You have to have there are concerns regarding the patient confidentiality and privacy of the data, and concerns regarding the data ownership. So who owns the data? So you have to understand the control, the process, and the access of the data, and whether the data would be used for some profitable for generating some profits by selling the data. And there are multiple parties who claim data ownership. So you have to understand who is responsible for the ownership of the data. There are concerns regarding cybersecurity, inappropriate use of data, inappropriate or inaccurate disclosures, or improper de-identification of data. The current healthcare regulatory environment has little incentive for data sharing. Examples, there are certain examples of data biobanks like the Cardiac Atlas project and the Visceral project, or the UK Biobank, which have overcome some of these challenges. And there has to be a change in the government regulation for promoting data sharing by adopting the bundles outcome based reimbursement over the fee for service model. Adoption of open data standards for AI is also one of the need of the hour. Adoption of creating anonymized benchmarking data sets with calibrated standards and updated on regular basis is absolutely important. The second issue is about transparency of data data and AI algorithms. If you have poorly labeled data, you will get poor results, so garbage in, garbage out. Accuracy of prediction depends on the accuracy of underlying annotations, which was mentioned earlier. Multiple model interpretability is necessary to understand how technology reached certain decisions or predictions. The black box approach, where the AI decision process is not explicit, is not beneficial, and we need to explain or justify a particular diagnosis and treatment outcomes or predictions that the AI generates. So transparency in process will potentially uncover new clinical insights. There is going to be an algorithmic bias which we need to keep in mind, in which there is reinforcing of certain practices based on race, sex, or ethnicity. Vendors or companies keep algorithms opaque for proprietary or financial reasons, which is not conducive for developing AI software. And machine learning has a potential to amplify or suppress bias because it is based on statistical tools. Transparency of training data and model interpretability would allow examination of the potential bias. Now, there are certain patient safety concerns. The safety challenges are related to the complex environment in which patients are examined and treated, the unpredictability of system behavior during learning, and uncertainty of human-machine interaction. The accountability of this process is also equally important. Who is responsible if patient suffers an adverse event due to an AI technology? Is it the vendor, the software developer, or is it the source of the training data? Impaired patient-physician relationship is also an important aspect, as is the auditability of the AI system and recoverability of the AI in case AI fails. Is there a provision for human takeover when required? The next point is the data standardization and integration. Data standardization is essentially a process of transforming data into common format to understand to be understood across different tools and methodologies. Data collected in different methods and different purposes. Data is stored in different formats, and this interoperability is extremely essential. So common standards need to integrate various algorithms. Common algorithms should run on variety of machines, and adoption of fast healthcare interoperability resources or FIHR framework, which would integrate the current DICOM and PACS images, is in the pipeline. Certain financial issues are also important. You have to understand that all these AI systems would require ongoing maintenance in incorporating increasing amounts of data. There needs periodic software updating, periodic updating and maintenance of hardware, developing new software for new hardware, and significant human capital and financial support. We have to understand what are the reimbursement models with using AI technologies. What is the potential for abuse for financial gain of these AI technologies? The clinical decision program to increase profits for certain drugs, tests, devices without the knowledge of the user, and financial incentives for adopting AI by businesses have also to be kept in mind. It is important to estimate actual benefit of using new technology to improve outcomes. So you have these examples of gene therapy and the electronic health records, which have overpromised but have underdelivered. Adopting regulations for AI use by government and regulators, as was done for telemedicine, is absolutely essential. Education of the AI literate workforce is a major roadblock as of now. Competency of healthcare workers in understanding the exact role of AI is imperative. Training of medical students during basic and residency courses in AI technologies is important. Training in special skill sets like programming, data science, ethical and legal issues concerning AI is also equally important, as is the concern regarding workforce retrenchment if and when AI becomes a dominant feature in clinical care. Reorganization of healthcare systems and organizations to incorporate AI-based technologies is also very essential, and clinicians will need to educate policymakers about the consequences of implementing AI, both good and bad. There are certain regulatory issues which are important, like the medical device regulatory process is prolonged, although it may be thorough. Regulatory agencies like the US FDA and the EU Commission, Medical Device Commission, are at the forefront of giving regulatory approvals to AI platforms. International Medical Device Regulator Forum, which is a group of medical device regulators working towards harmonizing international medical device regulation, is in force. The IMDRF has defined AI-based technology, which encompassed by the term software as a medical device, in short as SAMD. The General Data Protection and Regulation by the EU has laid comprehensive regulations for collection, storage, and use of personal information, and Article 22 particularly describes rights of citizens to receive explanation for algorithmic decisions. You have to understand the effect of GDPR and adopting AI, which is an explicit and informed consent for personal data collection. It gives power to the person providing data, essentially the patient, to track and select data used, and it is a right to explanation and limits type of models used by manufacturers, but this will hold manufacturers accountable. Regulation will slow down AI implementation in the short term, but facilitate implementation over long term by promoting public trust and patient engagement. So, to summarize, image-based fields like ophthalmology are easier to transition to AI-based technologies. We have certain devices like the IDX DR, which has been approved by FDA for commercial use. Creating special task force committees to address issues of AI technologies by national associations is absolutely the need of the hour. Interdisciplinary collaboration between clinicians and AI developers, data scientists and engineers is crucial. And no technology is foolproof, and one needs to understand its limitations. I would end this talk by a quote from Dr. Fei-Fei Li, who is one of the leading AI experts. And she says, I often tell my students not to be misled by the term artificial intelligence. There is nothing artificial about it. AI is made by humans, intended to behave like humans and ultimately impact human lives and human society. I thank once again all of you for your participation and the scientific committee of MOS for giving us this platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry about the glitch about not being able to see the PowerPoint presentation. I just failed to understand what happened. Is it possible for us to take a few questions, Sai? Mr. Sai? Or somebody from the Numerotech team?
Yes, doctor. Yes, doctor.
Yeah. So amongst all the presentations, I would start with Dr. Preeti. So we have these multiple inputs that go into glaucoma. So how do you think will these inputs impact the performance of AI platform when you are using it for glaucoma diagnosis?
See, it's as everybody has said, it depends on which kind of data set has been used to train. I would more be, if I understand, you're asking me that which kind of inputs would help train the system better. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes, essentially, yes.
Yeah. So, I would say clinically, where do people go wrong? Say in disc evaluation, they find it difficult to differentiate between discs which have large cup disc ratio, which are myopic discs. So, if we could give inputs on how to train the model better in those disc photographs where the comprehensive ophthalmologist is more likely to make mistakes, then that would be a better way to use this and a better model which would be helpful. A glaucoma specialist, I don't think, will require AI as much as a comprehensive ophthalmologist would need to diagnose or manage glaucoma. So, I would say use these models or use photographs which are going to be more confusing to a comprehensive ophthalmologist. So, that is what I would suggest while training the AI model.
The next question is to Dr. Sucheta. Are there any challenges unique to AI-based ROP screening that you foresee?
Yeah, I think I just mentioned one of the challenges that essentially the babies who are going to benefit from such kind of technology are usually going to be in rural or semi-rural setup where they don't have access to an expert and sick. They are usually in a sick condition on O2 support, getting treated for sepsis there. So they are not in a position to travel to cities to get an expert opinion. So if there are some, ambiguous images or ambiguous situation where AI is not in a position to give diagnosis, then that would become a challenge. And second challenge that I foresee is lack of doctor-patient relationship, which is of course there in all kind of telemedicine models. But especially in case of ROP, what we have observed or what my experience tells is that in most cases, parents are often very, very anxious. They are so financially, emotionally drained that in fact, even if an ophthalmologist goes for screening, they find it hard to trust an ophthalmologist diagnosis, so they always go back and confirm with the pediatrician, and the pediatrician would expect an ophthalmologist to have direct interaction with the parents to counsel them regarding ROP. So taking the ophthalmologist part away from this whole system would perhaps make pediatricians and the parents uncomfortable, but we would eventually have to find out solutions for that also. These are the main two challenges that I foresee.
Thank you. The next one is to Dr. Rajiv Raman. Are there any commercial solutions available for DR screening in India? And if not, then when can we expect one be available?
There are commercial things which are available. I would say Remedio comes with their own AI. Even Zeiss has got an AI which has been developed by Seri, Selena. That's an AI system which is developed by Seri, Dr. Tin Wong. So the Zeiss system comes with that. Then you have even this Forus, the camera which comes with their own AI system. So there are a couple of these AI models which are commercially available today.
Okay. Ms. Ranjana Agarwal, roughly how many images are required to develop and develop an AI system? And how do you think an ophthalmologist can help in this regard?
Sir, actually 10,000 plus systems are required for a better training of deep learning model. Deep learning requires huge data, that is its one of the limitations. But with segmentation, we can work with thousands of images. As we train the model with more number of images, we will get better accuracy. So that is what I said. In collaboration, if they work, it is possible to prepare such huge data. For one person or for one hospital, it is difficult to prepare this huge data because of the patient-doctor ratio.
And this question is open to all of you. Anybody could take it. Do you think AI will at some point in the future replace clinicians?
No, never.
not
Yeah,
no.
I think we are unanimous
We
in
are-
saying
yes,
that no.
Yes.
No.
No, it is
No, it
impossible.
can never, but it will make us more capable.
Exactly.
We need to look at a lot of, as in my talk I had mentioned, a lot of predictive ways, which even we cannot say, we cannot judge about it. We have to use the power of deep learning in a better manner. So it will definitely help us. It is one of the tool which will definitely help our patients or help us manage our patients much better.
So when I thought about, sorry, Preeti, please go.
It's like this during lockdown particularly. Now, doctors from remote areas could not refer their patients. So if they had this kind of deep learning, which makes them better, which gives them a more predictive outcome, maybe the number of referrals would be less. They would be able to manage those patients at their hometown much better. So I think that is one thing which, if we are able to use AI in a better way, patients will not have to travel from only the really needy patients may have to travel to a tertiary center. That would be one of the most effective ways we can use AI. But yes, sir.
Yeah, doctors definitely they will not go. But one of the concern for DR screening which came, especially in US and UK, that the graders will vanish because they had professional graders who were like trained, or even at SN we have optometrist graders. So probably they will lose their job, but that's also not true because you need a subset of the images to be regraded for your quality checks. So definitely nobody loses the job.
Right.
Yes,
So
I would like to add to this that yes, the job they will not lose their jobs. Only the profile will change. Like sir mentioned, Rajiv sir mentioned, their profile will change. Grader's profile will change because for training the AI software, again, annotation is or grading is necessary, that they will have to do, in fact, in more accurate way.
So when I thought of this question, I thought of an example like if you should have asked a charioteer maybe 1,000 years ago whether you will be losing your job a few thousand years down the line after the internal combustion engine came, probably would have laughed at the possibility. So probably, as everybody said, the nature of the job would change. We would have better tools, better wheels under us to drive clinical care. I once again thank each and every one of you for your participation. and sharing your ideas and thoughts on this evolving technology. And we hope that we have many more such symposia in the future to understand the application of AI in ophthalmology in particular. Just one last request, Dr. Sucheta, can you switch on your camera so I can just take a quick
Oh.
picture?
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you, and wishing you all a very happy Diwali.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you.
Diwali.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.